So if you missed every single TWAB video or update video from us in regards to Season the Splicer, you're good, man. This is why we make these videos right here. Now, by no means is this covering everything that's going to be changing in the new season, but these are the 10 big items, things you're definitely going to take notice of, especially if you're just now jumping back into Destiny 2. And by the way, we will be covering just about every one of these items individually, so feel free to subscribe, stick around, fellas, but let's get started. First up on the list, something you're probably going to notice immediately when Season the Splicer begins is the new stasis sidearm called Cryosthesia. Dude, I'm never going to get this name right. Now, this is legitimately a stasis sidearm, and I know we have a stasis weapon in the game, Salvation's Grip, but that's a heavy weapon. This sidearm, we actually got to see it in action, and it straight up freezes folks. I love it. Bungie's like, oh, you want less stasis? Shabam! Here's a stasis sidearm. Regardless of whether or not this weapon is good or bad for Destiny 2, it is definitely something that Bungie's beginning to do in expanding outside of their basic arc, void, and solar elemental damage types. Now, I would say the big deciding factors of whether or not this sidearm is going to be really good, and we're going to be reviewing it almost immediately, is of course its archetype. If it's like Traveler's Chosen archetype and feels just as good as Traveler's Chosen, but has like the ease of use of Devil's Ruin, then yes, this cryo sidearm is going to be nasty. Now, if you're completely anti-stasis and you're already looking at this going, oh hell no, I'm not playing any more Destiny 2 if I get frozen, then look no further than actually the new exotic that's coming out for Titans called the Path of Burning Steps. This is the first exotic that will actually combat stasis in its lockdown ability, essentially stating that the Titan armor that converts solar eliminations into increased weapon damage and makes them more difficult to lock down with stasis. Now, there's other exotics coming out this season, one for the Warlock and one for the Hunter, but what makes this exotic unique to me is the fact that it's offering a counter to stasis, and it makes sense. We've asked for a long time, why does our solar subclasses not hard counter stasis? It's quite literally fire versus ice. And I know somebody's gonna get into like the scientific molecular breakdown of like how stasis really works, and it's not actually ice. I get it, okay? I mean, I kind of get it, but I'm just saying I'm playing a video game and fire should be the counter to ice. And depending on how well received this exotic actually is, it could actually serve as a revival to some of our light-based subclasses, and the future may even present us subclasses, and I'm talking like way down the road, where subclasses will actually be counters to each other. Think of it almost as like the combat triangle. Now, the third thing you're gonna notice this season is actually a new player activity called Override. Now, this is actually a 6-player activity. It has been a minute since we've actually gotten a 6-player activity, since Season of the Dawn. What we're hoping with this activity is that it will be on the level of Menagerie. Don't get me wrong, Season of the Dawn and its 6-player activity was fun for a minute, but it was not Menagerie. Menagerie had everything going for it, from the loot, from the different rotation of bosses, from the semi-raid mechanics that are also mixed in. The reason why Menagerie to me really stood out amongst all other 6-player activities is because it was an activity presented to us to stay, and had it remained in the game with an updated loot pool, I can guarantee that we would still be doing that activity. Hopefully Override here will present us a long-term option and not just a seasonal pump and dump, rinse and repeat that we've seen from previous seasons. Moving on, at number 4, something we completely missed in the trailer the other day. As a preview to the Override activity, it showed 6 Guardians standing together. Something to take note of? Swords. More specifically, class-specific swords on the Warlock, Hunter, and Titan class. Now, we've had class-specific swords, and class-specific means you cannot use that sword on any other class but that specified class. Now, we've had a variety of class-specific swords, but the ones that really stood out the most from us was, of course, the Menagerie swords. You had Gold Tusk, which was tied to the Hunter class, Throne Cleaver, which was tied to the Titan class, and Death's Razor, which was tied to the Warlock class. What was a shame was there was a lot of people that didn't realize how potent these swords actually were. And it wasn't really until Fallen Guillotine that we started to see a resurgence of swords. And then, of course, we had Lament, which definitely shipped it pretty busted. But a huge reason why those swords had a moment to shine was, number 1, our Menagerie swords eventually got sunset, but number 2, Bungie had actually went out and nerfed certain powerful combos, as well as nerfing the perk Counterattack, which was a devastating perk back in the day pre-nerf. Now, with class-specific swords coming back, will we actually give them a try? Well, it definitely comes down to the perk combinations, what traits they can load out with, but simultaneously the frame of the weapon. You see, that was what was really holding back Death's Razor. It was the Warlock class-specific sword, but it was just a regular old adaptive frame sword. Stated from DMG here recently, though, in a reply to a Reddit thread, prediction that returning Warlock sword is still going to be comparatively underwhelming. But DMG actually replied and stated, but what if if the frame changed? Meaning, what if it wasn't just an adaptive sword? Yeah. Heavy breathing intensifies? Depending on what they actually do here with the frames, I have no idea. And that's probably going to be the biggest thing to change with these class-specific swords. Will they add it to like one of the new sword archetypes, such as Fall of Guillotine's Vortex frame, or even possibly make one of them a caster frame sword? Or will they do like they did last year and introduce new sword frames? That's also a possibility. Either way it goes, guys, very much looking forward to these. Moving on to number 5, Transmog. Do you have that favorite set of armor that is just the sexiest set of armor that you've ever seen, but its stat rolls are garbage? This is where Transmog comes into play. You will essentially be able to convert your favorite pieces of armor into ornaments to then be applied to your best sets of armors. Now, a couple things is going to happen here. Number 1, some of us may actually finally shed some vault space and cut ties with those favorite pieces of armor and just keep our best stat rolls. And number 2, I would assume this is going to spark a huge frenzy and everyone trying to transmog every piece of armor they possibly can. Simply because most of us are completionist players, we want every option in the game to be available under this new transmog system. Unfortunately, transmog is going to be capped. There's also a grind associated with transmog, and of course, the material that's required to turn your favorite armor pieces into universal ornaments called synth weaves will be for sale in the Eververse store. Trust me, this has sparked lots of debate within the Destiny community. No, it's not exactly pay to win, but to some players, cosmetics really is the end game. Personally, I think Bungie's actually going to turn around and remove the cap going into the next season after this one. They're going to cash out on the wells. Regardless though, for my players looking to rock the sexiest look possible and not be constrained to those low stat armor rolls, well then transmog's for you. Moving on to number 6, we're going to start diving into some of the sandbox changes, and this one's going to be the most noticeable one, or at least what we predict will be the most noticeable one, and that's actually 120 round per minute hand cannons. 120 round per minute hand cannons have the most range in the game amongst so many weapons, being outranged by only scout rifles in the game amongst primaries. It's kind of crazy that 120 round per minute hand cannons can outrange most pulse rifles. However, the range nerf that's coming for 120s will definitely knock it down a few notches. Stated from Bungie here, these weapons will now have damage and aim assist fall off distance reduced by between 2 and 4 meters based on the range stat. Now, depending on how Bungie really ties it to the range stat, it could be pretty significant, but they give us a clue here and state that this roughly halves the range buff that they received in Beyond Light. We're speculating somewhere around the 40 meter mark to maybe 42 meters with rangefinder, and that of course is at max range. Now, depending on how they tie this to the range stat, is there going to be diminishing returns on higher range? Bungie's done this before. Then of course it's going to be less range than even that. Regardless though, 120s will feel less potent than what they do now. Speaking of sandbox, at number 7, quick draw is being removed from aggressive shotguns, and it's also being nerfed. Yes, the quick draw perk itself. Probably one of my favorite perks on a multitude of weapons, whether it's been a sniper rifle, a shotgun, and especially slow handling weapons. 150 round per minute scout rifles, 120 round per minute hand cannons. Those weapons that have notoriously terrible handling was completely worked around with the quick draw perk. Quick draw itself will now only activate in its max handling benefit when you're actually switching weapons. The handling bonus will go away 1 second after switching to your weapon and when you aim down sights. Now, for aggressive shotguns like Fellwinter's and Astral Horizon, those weapons will have their perks replaced, going from quick draw to surplus. Bungie did this intentionally because they want shotgun users to not be rewarded for risky placement. As in, an opponent pushes you, you shouldn't be able to immediately swap to your shotgun, at least not on an aggressive shotgun that has the highest one-hit kill range amongst normal shotguns. I understand the logic, but will converting quick draw to surplus really make that big of a difference on shotguns like Astral Horizon and especially Fellwinter's Lie? We'll see. Honestly, where I'm going to notice it the most though, again, is in those slow handling primary weapons. I had a godly rolled Iron Banner Scout Rifle that had quick draw, an Igneous Hammer also with quick draw. But with these changes to this perk though, it has definitely dropped off our list of top tier perks. Which takes us to number 8. We are finally getting a tower vendor, like a true tower vendor. The Gunsmith, alongside Ada 1, will have a weekly rotation of inventory. Now, Ada will be offering armor sets chosen from the Royal Loot Pool, as well as a number of other armor upgrade materials, from modules to prisms to Ascended Shards, as well as the entire process with Synthweave. However, arguably the biggest change amongst tower vendors is to Banshee 44. The Gunsmith will no longer sell armor mods, but will retain the rest of the items that he currently sells. Additionally, on a weekly basis, Banshee 44 will sell a selection of 6 weapons, randomly chosen from the weapons in the Royal Loot Pool. 2 weapons of each: kinetic energy energy, and power weapons. These will have different perk rolls on each weapon that are randomly determined at the start of the week. So at every weekly reset, there will be 6 random weapons from the loot pool with potentially god rolls just waiting at the tower for us to buy. This is not exactly a new concept. We had this same formula back inside of Destiny 1, and I loved it because there's just some times where RNG is unrewarding. But checking in week to week just to see if one of your favorite weapons might be present with a god roll. Oh, now at number 9, we have a lot of new weapons coming, as well as some returning old weapons. However, up there as one of the most iconic weapons back in Destiny 1, Hung Jury is returning. And not just returning as regular old Hung Jury, but also an adept version of this scout rifle will be dropping starting June the 22nd. Or at least that's when Grandmaster Nightfalls are supposed to be releasing. Hopefully Hung Jury is the first one in rotation. Regardless though, at some point past June the 22nd, adept Hung Jury will be in the wild. Fellas, are you aroused yet? Now finally, at number 10, we get Fallen Babies. Aww. AKA Smollett. Nah, I'm kidding. That's not number 10. But on a real note, they're kind of cute. But at number 10, Vault of Glass is returning. This was the first Destiny 1 raid, and it's really what saved Destiny for many of us. And it definitely saved it for me because I was on my way out. I mean, I was just about to hit the uninstall button on Destiny 1, and then I played Vault of Glass. It changed us, and it changed the way we saw Destiny. Now, not only is Vault of Glass returning, but every reward associated with it is also returning. Fatebringer, Found Verdict, Praedent's Timepiece, Praedent's Revenge, Vex Mythoclast. Like, don't get me wrong, when we talk about Hung Jury and these other weapons and Palindrome and stuff, they're iconic. But these weapons, they're the weapons that began it all. I still remember my very first run of Vault of Glass. Didn't get far, but I remember holding out in the corner with Suro's Regime. I just bought it from Xur, and I was just blowing my load into those fanatics, trying to stay alive. And it was such a wonderful experience. So guys, those are our 10 changes, the 10 big changes that will be dropping with Season of the Splicer. Granted, there are many other changes, and for those, we will be individually covering for the rest of this week. We'll have breakdown videos, weapon reviews, and lots of sandbox testing. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.